Hello, my name is Anna Daku and I'm the knitwear designer behind the Bluebird Box. I live in Alberta, Canada, northeast of Edmonton, Alberta, with my husband, our 4 kids, and also my parents live on the same property. We live out in the country on 13.5 acres of land, and we have chickens and sheep and a dog and a cat. We live really close to a national park called Elk Island National Park. Probably Canada's most boring national park, but if you're going to live near a park, it might as well be a national one. And we have a creek running through our property that eventually connects to the park, so we have lots of wildlife here. Moose, whitetail and mule deer, lots of different kinds of birds. We also have lots of predators, so coyotes, bears, badgers. We've had badgers and skunks on our land, and yeah, there's just a variety. So I really wanted to start this podcast because I really want to be able to explain my designs and my design process a little bit more. Currently, I really only do that on Instagram, and it's just not the greatest platform for that kind of thing. I feel like I'd be able to explain more of the thought behind how I design things on a podcast. Plus, I love watching podcasts. I think all of us, if you're watching this, then you're obviously obsessed with knitting and want to know more and want to be inspired. So I hope you find something that you enjoy on this little channel. So I won't tell you everything that I've ever designed because I've been doing it for a while. I started in 2011, so that's 10 years ago. The first thing I designed was a little kid's bonnet. It's a free pattern. You can check it out if you want. And then I designed a couple more things, some free things and some paid for patterns until 2012. And then from that point on, that was when I had my second child. From that point on, I just couldn't do the thinking required for pattern designing. I knit like crazy, and I made up a whole bunch of things, but I never did any of the work that you needed to do in order to publish it. So for that I took 7 years off. So for that 7 years of not publishing, the indie knitwear design world completely shifted. So when I first published my patterns, they were on Ravelry. Ravelry had been around just for a few years, so it was pretty new, and the patterns that I knit from were commercial patterns. And back then, I think it's shifted now, so there are a lot of commercial patterns that do involve a testing process, but back then patterns were just tech edited, and the ones that I worked from weren't great. They had lots of mistakes. You had to do a lot of figuring out on your own. There was no tutorials. There was no YouTube then. So I just felt like there was room for me to create patterns. I just felt like there was room for improvement, basically. These days, I don't know if I would have had the guts to publish, but yeah, it's just a different world now. So now you're expected to pay for tech editing. You're expected to have enough of a followership to have testers sign up. So it was quite overwhelming coming back in. I owe a lot of debt to Jamie from Cozy Up Knits. She is a friend from a long ways back, and she was actually my very first tester of any of my patterns. And she was really encouraging that I keep going, that I come back in, and she helped me find testers for my first patterns coming back in. So thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I couldn't have been here without you and without those first testers who, yeah, jumped on board, not really knowing anything about me or how I design. So anyway, I've designed some things since then, so I won't go through everything I've ever designed, but I'll just talk about some of the things I've designed recently and released, and I'll talk about some of the things that I am in the midst of designing or having tested, and maybe I will get to some of the things that I plan to design in the near future. So we'll start off with accessories. So first we'll talk about, actually we'll go in order. So just in November I released a companion set of patterns. So there's a pullover and there's also a hat. So this is a colorwork hat knit in, so much hair, in Brine Dye Works DK, her Highland DK. It has, yeah, she just has an amazing color palette that I love. It's super like moody, but still gorgeous. So I designed this hat so that if you knit the pullover, then you can have a hat to match. It's kind of my favorite style of hat is like slim and tall. I don't like a lot of slouch, but I just like it to have a little bit of room at the top there. And it's super warm, has this corrugated ribbing along the brim. So that means there's not a lot of stretch, so you have to be careful of size when you knit this one. This is called the Shaded Spectrum. And yeah, I left it without a palm, but I'm not sure. I always go back and forth between having a palm and not having a palm. I don't know, what do you guys think? I do always put like a little button inside, right beside the hole where you weave in your end, and then you can stick whatever end of your palm you have. This one has an elastic, but if you have a ribbon, same idea, and then you wrap it around the button, and that way you can decide whether you want a different palm or no palm at all. Yeah, it's kind of cute with the pom-pom. I never can decide. Okay, and then, okay, so I think I'll go into what's coming out this week. So coming out this week is the Miles hat. It's just a simple knit and purl texture, but it creates this, it looks almost like increases and decreases, but it's not, it's just knit and purl. And it comes with a matching mitten. These are the adult large, so they're a bit big on me. These guys. And the hat. So the hat has a double brim, so you can do a slouchy version, or you can have it doubled to be warmer, which it's like -20 today, so I would go with the double. And with the gauge that I used, you can use a superwash DK held with a mohair like this one, or you can just use a superwash worsted. So these guys are knit in Sassy Strings worsted. It's 100% merino, I think, and it's in the color Wilderness. And then this is some Stash DK from Robin of Rosehill Yarns. She and Cozy Up and Brick and Bubble did a collaboration last Christmas for a hat and a mug set, and it was the main color of that, this pink hat. Oh, I'll show you. I'm not going to talk about all my knitting, but everything links to something else. So this is the hat pattern that Cozy Up did, and this was a rose and pearl pom-pom. So yeah, so it's this fun Christmas hat called the Little Pine Tree. So the main color is like this pink with green and blue speckles in it. So that's what I used as the base of this one. And then I held it with Sassy Strings Mohair in Solitude. I think it's called Solitude. Everything's just out of reach. Okay, yeah, here's the remainder of the DK skein from Rosehill, and this is the mohair in the Solitude. So yeah, those two together gave me this. And then my amazing tester, Brittany from Crux Fibers, was testing the hat, the child size hat. Comes in 2 sizes, adult and child. It has, because the whole thing is knit and purl, it's quite stretchy, so it fits like a variety of head sizes. She suggested that she might want to do a cowl, so just spur of the moment in our chat thread, we designed a cowl together and she knitted up. So I intended to also do a sample, but this is as far as I've gotten, so I'm not sure if I'll get it done, and if I get it done I definitely won't get it photographed, but I would like to, so it will be like a cowl with ribbing on the bottom and then this stitch pattern I called the Miles stitch on the top or in the middle, and then ribbing again. So I don't have enough of the Wilderness to do much of the cowl really. I'm gonna try and get away with the ribbing in the green, and then I also didn't have enough in the DK left to knit much of it, but I will. This is also a Rosehill Yarn DK. This is the, I can't remember what she called it. I don't think it's a repeat colorway, but it was the one I used for the Wild Rosie dress. And yeah, she based it, she had a picture of wild roses, which is Alberta's provincial flower, and she came up with that color, which is absolutely gorgeous. It has like brown and yellow mixed with pink, which doesn't sound great, but it's just amazing in a finished object. So anyway, I'm gonna try and mix those up for the center Miles stitch portion, and then I'll finish off with the green, the dark green, for the ribbing again. So I named this the Miles hat, the Miles accessory collection, because, and I named it after the movie The Holiday. I'm super into that movie during the Christmas season. It's one of my favorites, and it has Jack Black in a romantic comedy, and he's like this goofy, awkward, but super endearing character. And so I just thought his simplicity, which draws people in, was sort of what this stitch pattern does for me. It's super simple, but it's engaging and interesting and pretty at the end. Jack Black's not pretty. I don't know. Okay, so that one's coming out this week. And then I just released my first ever shawl pattern. So that kind of has a backstory also, because this summer I released a summer tank that did really well, like beyond what I ever expected a summer knitting pattern to do. So, and I really enjoyed, I just think the lace stitch in that pattern is really beautiful. And then I thought, well, if I put that into a shawl and it increases in the same way as the tank does, then it will end up in a triangle, right? Well, it didn't. This is the shawl. It turned into a crescent. It must be because the edges are different gauge than the central lace pattern, which is looser, and then as you increase the proportion of lace, it also increases in stitch count, but also in just width by the gauge change. Anyway, I'm not really sure exactly, but it also did a funky thing where it didn't have any wings. It just stopped here, like this. And it was straight edged on both sides. So you couldn't really wrap it around yourself. So I ended up having to add short rows to the pattern to grow the wings. So it starts off with an I-cord cast on, which I couldn't find any cast on that I really enjoyed, so I kind of made up my own way. I'm sure somebody else has done it this way before, but I couldn't find any tutorials for it, so I have a tutorial. I'm not great at making tutorials, but hopefully it's manageable for you. And then you continue the I-cord on each side by slipping the first 2 stitches of each row, and then there's also some slip stitches along the edge of the lace, which makes it kind of pop out a little bit, sort of like this kind of mimics the I-cord there. And so yeah, it just keeps going and going and going, and then at the very end you do an I-cord bind off across all these stitches. Yeah, that's it. I always am fully aware of my lack of shoulder mobility when I try and put on a shawl. That's the Kenosee Shawl. I don't think I said that. And it is based off the chart from the Kenosee tank, which was a completely reversible pattern, so you can wear it. This is the front, this is what I intended the front to be, and this is the back, but you could have this as the front. And I've seen some of my testers wore it with just a neutral camisole underneath, and it looks really nice. So it's like a V-neck that way, a scoop neck this way, and then if you're really feeling like you're bored of those 2 options, you can flip it inside out and do it the other way. with a different texture. Okay, so I've also knit some other accessories. I don't know how interesting they are. They're not patterns. This one was just, I needed just a functional item, so I made this kind of buff thing. It's not a headband. I find that headbands don't stay on my slippery hair. My hair is really slick, so they just shift around and then my ears aren't covered. So, but I'm often have my hair up, and I'm often going, just like running outside to deal with the sheep or the dog, or going over to my parents' house. So I don't want to have to like take my hair out, put on a toque, go outside, take the toque off, put my hair up. So I just wanted something that like goes over. So it's not attractive, but it's functional. And it, yeah, it keeps my ears warm for a short trip. And then I added just a garter and slip stitch texture similar to my Spray Lakes hat and cowl pattern, just to like give you something to do that's not just stockinette in the round. Yeah, if you want to know details about that, I'm not gonna publish this pattern, but I can send you the stitch count and the yarn and needles that I used. It's pretty simple. And then there's a couple failed hat patterns. I don't know if they're failed so much as I just lost interest in them, and I wasn't keen enough to go through all the publishing stuff that you have to do in order to publish something. So this is from this chart here is from the Twisted Stitch source book by Nora Gahn, which is an amazing book. I'm completely addicted to stitch patterns. Stitch pattern Bibles, like dictionaries. And I could release this pattern because stitch dictionaries do not own the stitch. You can't copy their images, and you can't copy and paste their directions, but nobody owns a technique in knitting. So even Nora Gahn says specifically in her book that you can use it for paid designs. But I just wasn't thrilled with how it turned out. I think I did this one as a child size, so I don't know if it'll fit me. It's a little bit small. Yeah, it's too small. But yeah, it's small, but you get the idea. It's cute. And then I thought, oh, I can do that one better. So, but then I wasn't thrilled with the wool I used. So if I'm not thrilled with the wool I used, I'm not going to recommend it to other people, which means that then I have to knit another sample. And I didn't love it enough to knit another sample. So this is the same kind of idea, but it's all ribbed. And the stitch pattern goes like right to the brim, but I like that one better. I just didn't love it enough. So maybe one day. You let me know, what do you think? Okay, that's my accessory designs. And then I've released a couple patterns, I should have maybe ironed this or something. It's been in my closet. This is the Moody Hue pattern by me. but it's in Brian Dyeworks Highland DK, which is really nice, plump DK weight yarn. So it also has backstory. So this past January, I released some kids patterns that I used ginger snap that luxe worsted in this rainbow gradient. These have also been stuffed in drawers. Yeah, so then that was a really fun, there's just ends not trimmed, but that was a really fun design and a really fun project with Kim from Ginger Snap. Here's another one that I did. I kind of adjusted the pattern a bit, but and I put some corrugated ribbing on the sleeves. So after that project, then Brian Dye Works released a rainbow set in her style. It didn't have anything to do with this is called the Sun Shower pullover, a kid's design. It didn't have anything to do with the Sun Shower, but I like saw it and I was like, oh my goodness, I love that rainbow and I want it. So then I talked to Charity about designing an adult version in her colorway. So the great thing about the Highland DK is that it's non-superwash, so it kind of plumps a little bit when you wash it, and not a ton because it isn't woolen spun or anything, but it does do it more than like a superwash wool will. So you can actually use Ginger Snap's, her bright colors for this pattern also. It's this, the gauge will work for either yarn. Yeah, so anyway, I really love this design and this wool, and this is like my favorite color of the whole set. It's so beautiful. This one's called Dark Chocolate, and this is Plum Jam and Brulee Bosque. Yeah, Bosque. Do you say Bosch? Bosque? Pears? That's what it's named after, those kinds of pears. Nori, Oily Swell, and then Dark Chocolate again. So the Moody Hue is worked from the top down, and then you work this ribbing, and then you do some short rows before the color work, and then you're increasing the color work yoke in pattern through a wedge chart. And then when you get to this, the end of the wedge, you do a couple more short rows, and then you divide for your body and sleeves. You work the body down. There's a little bit of waist shaping here. I just find that if I keep the yoke the same width down, there's just a lot of extra fabric and it kind of balloons out. I like the extra room in my armpit and around my chest, but I don't like it like wafting in the breeze. I like it to be a little bit narrower fitting towards my pant line so that the cold air isn't blowing up my shirt. And then, yeah, then you pick up the sleeves and work them down. So you decrease to this part, and then this is straight, and then you decrease again to the cuff. Okay, so currently in testing, I have the Legacy pullover. So the Legacy pullover is named after the park, the green space, where the sheep that grew this wool used to graze. I used to live in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, and they have their mascot, their city mascot is a sheep, because they have a flock that grazes their green space every summer, and you can go and visit the sheep. And I'm not sure the rules this year or these years now because it's a different flock than when we lived there, but you used to be able to like feed them leaves and pet them, and yeah, it was probably like 40 sheep that were out there grazing. It was pretty great. And my kids were really little when we lived there. My 3 of my kids were born in Fort Saskatchewan, so yeah, they were just little kids, so we just love to go and see the sheep, and then you could go run around the green space and run up and down the hill. And it's the site of the old Northwest Mounted Police Fort. So there's lots of like there's a museum there that has a bunch of little buildings in it. Not in it, but on the grounds. So yeah, it's just a beautiful park, and with the added bonus of sheep. So there is a lady who collects and has spun wool yarn from fleeces around Edmonton, and she naturally dyes the yarn herself and she sells it. Her name is Kaylee, and you can find her on Instagram as Kaylee the Ludite, and I believe that's her website name also. So I found her because I'm really keen on sourcing local materials. None of that was available to me when I started knitting. At least it was not known to me. Anything that I found was like acrylic. That's basically all, and it was in like horribly garish colors. There was nothing naturally dyed, that's for sure, which is totally my jam. So anyway, when I found Kaylee, I was like instantly stalking her and figuring out where she was getting these fleeces from, and she posted saying that she had these fleece from Fort Saskatchewan. I was like, well, Fort Saskatchewan doesn't have sheep except the sheep that graze the actual green space at Legacy Park. So I messaged her and asked her, what is that from the flock that actually grazes the park? And she said yes. So I immediately ordered some of those skeins, and then I just was so excited about the potential of knitting a sweater and designing a sweater based on that wool. So then I talked to Kaylee, and we were both keen on collaborating. So she sent me some more of that wool so that I had enough to knit a sweater. So I knit this colorwork pullover. So it has the colorwork yoke and also the colorwork sleeves. And it's just amazing. Like when you knit a pullover with heavy superwash and you have it in your lap, it can get hot and heavy, but it gets like a sweaty heavy. Whereas this yarn, you wear it and you feel like you're getting hugged by a sheep. And when I was knitting with it, my legs were just like warm from my bones almost. It's just a completely different kind of warmth. And so the sheep that grew this wool are Finn sheep, and that's a longer staple wool on the longer side. So I wasn't sure, Kaylee wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure how well it would do in color work, but actually it's done really well, and it's like made this really nice cohesive fabric. So it's like a light fingering weight yarn, but it's at a 24 stitch gauge, so that's quite loose for that weight. Not quite loose, but it's on the looser side. But it still made this like beautifully warm, cohesive, like there's not a lot of space in it, and it's like getting a big hug from a sheep. So this is the Legacy pullover, and it's currently in testing, and it should be released March 1st. So another one that I have finished but is not ready for publishing yet is this vest. My mom has been asking me to design a vest in worsted weight for probably 2 years. And I don't know, I just haven't been excited to do it, I guess. She wants to knit it for my dad. And I don't have anything against designing or knitting men's garments, but I just don't get excited about it, I guess. But I've been planning and wanting to do it, and so when I figured out that I could make one for myself and it would fit into my wardrobe, then I got excited about it. So this still is not a pattern that my mom can knit for my dad, because we'll have to change some of the, it's a cropped vest and it's got waist shaping, so we'll have to alter it to be a man's garment, but that should be easy enough to do. So this is this is the vest. Just ignore the stitch markers marking the increases. It's from the bottom up, and it has this twisted stitch, again from the Twisted Stitch source book that I'm currently all about, just on the underarms, and the rest is in stockinette. And it's a little bit cropped, and yeah, doesn't take very much wool. And it's in, this one is in Crux Fibers. Brittany has started sourcing some Canadian yarns, so this is a Canadian yarn, and it's 100% wool, and it's in the color Mrs. Brown. So January probably I will be calling for testers for that vest. And I don't know if you want to hear about other plans or not. I have some swatches here I could show, but I don't know how interesting that is. I get really excited about swatches, but I just love knitted fabrics in any shape or form. Maybe I'll just leave it at that for today. So thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed that and got some interesting information out of it. And I hope you have a great December and a lovely Christmas season. And I might see you again. Bye.